It seems that no matter how famous, powerful, or celebrated you become, your actions eventually cast a long shadow that you cannot outrun.
I think like these people have to go jail. They have to go jail.
The woman who claimed mixed martial arts fighter Conor McGregor brutally raped her in a Dublin hotel penthouse was awarded over $250,000 on Friday by a civil court jury in Ireland.
Mr. McGregor, you're a rapist.
To all the victims of sexual assault, I hope my story is a reminder that no matter how afraid you might be, speak up, you have a voice, and keep on fighting.
There comes a point where the applause fades and the stark reality of personal conduct takes center stage. At the very heart of the modern Irish legend, the man who called himself Mystic Mac and predicted his own meteoric rise, now finds his most significant battles are not being waged in the famed octagon, but within the cold, sterile walls of a courtroom. Shocking, deeply troubling news has enveloped the career of Conor McGregor as he stands accused of a heinous crime that threatens to eclipse every achievement he has ever earned. An Irish court is meticulously examining a controversial and disturbing incident, one that gains immense significance precisely because of Conor's notoriously volatile character and his long, well-documented history of public and private problems. Today, we will not just recount the headlines, we will delve into the anatomy of a downfall. We will explore the expected and perhaps inevitable end for Conor McGregor and ask the question that hangs heavy in the air. Will he or can he ever return to the cage again?
Stand your base! Stand your base! The space is your space, yeah?
To understand the fall, one must first appreciate the ascent. Conor McGregor wasn't just a fighter, he was a cultural phenomenon. He was a plumber's apprentice from Crumlin, Dublin, who, through sheer force of will, unparalleled self-belief, and devastating knockout power, became the biggest star in the history of combat sports. He was the champ, holding 2 UFC belts simultaneously, a feat that immortalized him. His press conferences were events in themselves, a masterclass in psychological warfare and witty insults that left opponents mentally defeated before they even stepped into the cage. He sold millions of pay-per-views, brought unprecedented attention to the sport, and made hundreds of millions of dollars. He was the embodiment of the rags to riches dream. But as the years went on, the charming, witty rebel began to morph into something darker, a caricature of his own success. The final years of the Irish fighter's career have been defined less by his athletic prowess and more by his increasingly frequent and serious run-ins with the law. Because of these escalating issues and his polarizing personality, the most unfortunate aspect is that he still commands a legion of devoted fans. They see the great athlete, the revolutionary figure, but perhaps choose to ignore the deeply flawed man. Now it appears he is at the very end of his path, not because of a loss in the cage, but due to a long series of uncalculated, reckless, and sensational actions that have finally culminated in a crisis from which there may be no return.
Sometimes it kind of takes me back, but I have to realize that that's not the attitude or the behavior of a leader, of a martial artist, of a champion. So I must get my head screwed on and just get back in the game and fight for redemption, retribution, respect.
It has become a grimly predictable annual tradition for Conor McGregor to be at the epicenter of some new scandalous event. Let us chronicle this descent. The warning signs were there for years. In November of 2017, at a Bellator MMA event in his hometown of Dublin, the world saw a flash of the uncontrollable rage simmering beneath the surface. After his teammate Charlie Ward won, and credential-less McGregor vaulted over the cage fence to celebrate. He was not a licensed cornerman and had no right to be there. When veteran referee Mark Goddard attempted to restore order and asked Conor to leave, McGregor exploded. He shoved the referee, a cardinal sin in any sport, and unleashed a torrent of verbal abuse. Security guards had to intervene and physically restrain him. It was a shocking display of disrespect for authority and the rules of the sport that had made him a king. Incredibly, this blatant act of aggression resulted in no significant administrative penalties, sending a dangerous message that perhaps the normal rules did not apply to Conor McGregor. This sense of impunity seemed to fuel his next, even more infamous act. During the heated build-up to his rival Khabib Nurmagomedov's fight at UFC 223 inches April 2018, Conor flew from Ireland to New York with an entourage. In an act of calculated chaos, he and his crew stormed the Barclays Center hunting for Khabib. They found him on a bus carrying other fighters and proceeded to attack the vehicle. McGregor was famously captured on video throwing a heavy steel dolly through a window, shattering glass everywhere. The target was Khabib, but the victims were other athletes. Fighter Michael Chiesa suffered facial lacerations, and Ray Borg sustained eye injuries from the glass shards. Both were forced to withdraw from their scheduled fights, their careers and paychecks directly impacted by McGregor's rampage. The question lingered: what would the consequences be for this brazen assault? Initially, he was arrested facing serious felony charges, yet, through a plea deal, these were reduced. He was ultimately released after paying a fine and serving a mere 5 days of community service. For an act that injured fellow professionals and endangered dozens, the punishment was seen by many as astonishingly light, further cementing the idea that his fame was a shield. The pattern of behavior only worsened. In March 2019, Conor was back in the headlines, this time for snatching and smashing a fan's phone outside a Miami hotel. Once again, he was arrested, and once again, he was quickly released after paying a fine. It was another instance of a man whose wealth and fame had seemingly disconnected him from normal consequences. Just 1 month later, an even more disturbing video surfaced. It showed McGregor in a Dublin pub, offering patrons a glass of his own brand of whiskey. When an elderly man politely declined the offer twice, McGregor, incensed by the perceived slight, viciously punched the man in the head. The unprovoked attack on a senior citizen was captured in crystal clear quality by the pub's surveillance cameras. The public backlash was immense. This wasn't a fellow fighter or an aggressive fan, it was a quiet man in a pub. For this, he was sentenced to a paltry fine and was compelled to issue a public apology on television. After this long and sordid list of incidents, a clear question emerged: was Conor McGregor above the law? The crime that may truly and permanently end his career, however, is of a different and far more sinister nature, escalating far beyond public brawls and property damage. Conor has been subjected to several serious sexual assault charges. In September 2020, reports surfaced that he was arrested in Corsica for attempted sexual assault and indecent exposure. While this case was eventually closed due to a lack of sufficient evidence to proceed with a criminal prosecution, it cast a dark and disturbing cloud over his name. More recently, and with far more damaging consequences, a woman came forward accusing the fighter of a violent sexual assault in a Dublin hotel room back in 2018. During the subsequent civil trial, Conor McGregor did not deny that a sexual encounter had occurred. Instead, his defense was that it was entirely consensual. He also made the stunning admission that he was under the influence of narcotics during the incident. Investigators and the court system examined the evidence. While a criminal case did not proceed, the victim pursued a civil case, which operates under a different standard of proof. In a criminal court, guilt must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil court, a defendant can be found liable based on a preponderance of the evidence, a lower threshold. This distinction is critical. The court ultimately found Conor McGregor liable for the assault. This verdict means that based on the evidence presented, it was more likely than not that he committed the act as the victim described. While this finding meant he avoided prison time, he was ordered to pay significant financial compensation to his victim, a legal judgment that serves as a powerful and damning indictment of his actions. The victim's testimony was harrowing, describing a violent and terrifying ordeal. We are not here to play the role of judge or jury, but to report on the facts that are now part of the public record. This verdict is a catastrophic blow to his reputation and raises the most critical question of his professional life. It firmly establishes the possibility of Conor leaving the UFC and not fighting again. His brand, once meticulously built on a foundation of rebellious charisma and witty charm, is now permanently and irrevocably stained by these severe and credible findings of sexual violence. This situation is fundamentally different from all his past controversies. A comparison might be made to the boxer Mike Tyson, who was criminally convicted and served prison time for rape, yet managed to return to his sport. However, we live in a different era. The social climate, especially regarding accountability for sexual misconduct, has profoundly shifted. Furthermore, the UFC is no longer a fringe organization. It is a global, multi-billion-dollar brand owned by Endeavor, a publicly traded company with shareholders, corporate sponsors, and a mainstream image to protect. The central issue now becomes a stark business calculation. Can the UFC afford to be associated with him any longer? This introduces the very real and probable scenario of Conor McGregor's exit from the promotion and his permanent retirement from the sport of fighting. The organization and its president Dana White, who has historically been fiercely protective of McGregor as his biggest star and financial asset, are now in an impossible position. How can they, in good conscience and sound business sense, promote a fighter who has been legally found liable for such a violent act? This is no longer just a legal problem for Conor. It's a moral and financial crisis for the UFC. The public's reaction will be a deciding factor, and the tide has turned. Many fighters, including his greatest rival Khabib Nurmagomedov, have publicly condemned him, with Khabib stating that justice will ultimately prevail. He is barely even capable of being a respectful human being. The sheer volume of vile things he has said to people, the endless stream of arrogant social media posts, and his entire attitude, as if he is superior to every other person who walks the face of the earth, have all contributed to this moment. Now, with these countless accusations and a civil finding of liability against him, it seems life is delivering a brutal, long overdue lesson in humility. While the exact details of every story might be debated by his staunchest supporters, a clear and undeniable pattern of destructive, violent, and unacceptable behavior has emerged over many years. This leads us to the ultimate solemn question: what is Conor McGregor's fate? Is the possibility of Conor leaving the UFC and not fighting again no longer a mere possibility, but an impending inevitability? Is this the sad, disgraceful, and inevitable ending for one of the most brilliant and captivating stars the world of sports has ever seen? Has the man finally been consumed and destroyed by the myth he so carefully created?